Hey, folks, welcome to the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast, where sheep and goat production is not just our hobby, it's our bread and butter. Howdy, folks. I am Leon Gaiman with Lost Creek Wholesale, your universal feeder distributor.
And I'm Matt Nault with Glenbrook Farm.
So who is Lost Creek Wholesale? So just a little bit of our background history. Steve Nault is a store, Lost Creek Ag, and where he was servicing the local farm communities with farm supplies, fertilizer, gates, and he was selling quite a bit of sheep and goat equipment. So Steve was interested in bringing on some more sheep and goat equipment, and he started looking at some of the products that are used in Australia. We all know Australia is the sheep capital of the world. They're definitely ahead of us here in U.S. by quite a few years. And he ended up bringing on a saliva lick feeder called Universal Feeders. And he brought that line over here to U.S. and is now the sole distributors for U.S. and Canada for the Universal Feeders. So some of you may not be familiar with what a saliva lick feeder is. A saliva lick feeder looks very much just like a self feeder or like a bulk feeder, but they have one additional component to them, and that is the ability to adjust the width of a small groove that the feed flows out into. It doesn't just flow into the trough. It comes down into a very small groove where the animal has to literally stick its tongue into that groove, and it can only access whatever feed will stick to its tongue. So as the animal licks, its tongue gets dry, and the animal has to quit eating. It either has to walk away, go lay down, ruminate, or go back to grazing, or whatever. One of the key benefits is that animal has free access to that feeder 24/7. It can come back and eat small amounts as the saliva builds up. It offers the ability to supplement. We're talking sheep and goats here, so it offers the ability to supplement sheep on pasture. I personally like to use them for supplementing. Maybe I have some ewe lambs I want to grow out, and I have them on pasture, and I want to just add a little bit to their ration just to boost them a little. You can use whole grain, you can use a good quality pelleted feed in them. You can use them to creep feed lambs or kids. We have creep gate options that attach to the sides of the feeder. You can open up the saliva lick portion of it to basically give free choice access to the feeder, and the lambs and kids can access that feeder through a traditional style creep gate. These feeders also do work for cattle. We have different style bases that would bring your trough height up a little higher if you wanted to use them for cattle, and a lower one for sheep and goats. We also offer a cattle creep panel. It's very, very similar to a traditional calf creep panel.
Yeah, another benefit or a great place to use these lick feeders is for flush feeding ewes that are out on pasture. If you have the ewes out on pasture, you're getting ready for breeding season, and you just want to give them a little bit of extra grain to flush them, you can just put these feeders out there and get them set where they are getting a pound of grain or whatever you want them to. And you can just fill the feeder up. Once you have it set, you can just fill it up and they get the grain they need. And much easier than dragging troughs out there and trying to feed grain that way, or there's different ways of trying to flush, but this is a really nice feature. Yeah,
definitely flush feeding. That's a good way to use them. And when you're feeding in a trough, when your sheep see you coming with that bucket of grain, you know how they'll almost run through fences to get to that feed. I think the sheep stay a lot calmer whether you're using these feeders on a pasture setting or in the barn, just because they have that 24/7 access to the feed.
Yeah. You don't have that, as soon as you get in the barn or out in the pasture where all the sheep gather up and start banging at you. If they have these lick feeders in there, it's there all the time. It's not affected by you showing up. I really like that part of it. And actually I should know their name, but the guys from Australia that make these feeders were just at my place.
And Bruce.
other week, and they were pointing out how out on a pasture setting like that, or we graze cover crops a lot, how much more value the sheep are going to get out of that 1 pound of grain out of a lick feeder, because you get a little bit at a time, which lets their stomach break it down better than if you put a trough out there and dump a pound of grain in. They're going to gobble it up all in one shot, and it won't get near as much benefit out of it as if they just get a little bit throughout the day. And I think that's a really important part about these feeders, that just the efficiency of the grain that we do feed through.
Yeah, it definitely keeps your rumen pH a lot more even.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just by that little bit here and a little bit there.
Mm-hmm.
Another feature these feeders have is they have built-in fork pockets on the bottom of them. You can pick them up with a skid loader or a loader tractor. They have skids on the bottom of them. I just hook the feeder to my side-by-side and drag it to the next paddock when I'm on pasture. The bases are hot dip galvanized. The feed hopper part is all galvanized sheet metal. Very, very heavy-duty design. So what's our goal for this podcast? So myself being a sheep farmer, I have definitely have an interest in the sheep production world. And after I started working for Lost Creek Wholesale, we came up with this idea of maybe starting some type of informative podcast to not only talk about our feeders and other pieces of equipment that we would like to bring into our lineup, but just an in-depth discussion on good information on sheep and goat production. And the question came up, who else could we bring on to help with this podcast? And my mind went to Matt Nault. He's a friend of mine for quite a few years. Him and I share a lot of similar production goals, genetic goals, and ideals with our sheep systems. And so we made the decision to bring Matt on, and Matt was excited to come on and help us with this podcast. So
yeah, it was interesting when you approached me about doing this podcast, because it was something I had already been thinking that I'd like to do, is start a podcast. I think the sheep industry is at a really exciting place, especially here on the East Coast. There's a lot of interest in it, and having some education things out there available for people is important. So it was something that I had already been thinking about. Probably would not have happened for a while yet, just with the logistics behind, a podcast is a lot of editing and that sort of thing. And I didn't feel like I had the time for that. So when Liam approached me about being on this podcast, I was like, this is perfect. I can be on the podcast, and Liam will do the editing and all the hard work, and I get to show up and have fun. So, so it was, it was perfect for me, for us, and I'm excited to see where this takes us.
Yeah, same here. I'm excited to see where this goes.
So what are our goals for this podcast, Liam? Or what are our thoughts? Because I think we both feel like this will kind of take on a life of its own. What have we been thinking about this podcast?
So I think to start, we're going to discuss a little bit some of our own production practices. And one thing I'm pretty excited about is the opportunity to interview other producers, and not just hobby producers, guys that are doing sheep production and goat production. We can't leave these goat guys out of this picture. I'm sorry, goat fellas.
We'll try.
We'll try hard.
Yeah, for the goat guys that are listening, every time you hear sheep, just replace it with a goat.
There you go. There we go. But they all make just about the same. They make about the same noise.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, we'd like to interview other producers. I have a few guys in mind that I would be really interested in hearing an in-depth discussion on how they run their systems. And while we're talking about that, if there's any listeners out there that know of a producer on a commercial scale that has good production system, we'd like to hear about it. Yeah. So, and another thing we would like to do is do a question and answer episode. So we'd like to take listener questions, and we'll probably compile a list. And
yeah, as we're talking about things, or as we're interviewing people, and there's a question that comes up, just write it down and give us a call. We'll share our contact information here, or email.
I'll just give that right now, and I'll give it again later. But questions, if you got a question, you can call 717-310-3641 and select there will be a menu there to select the option for Sheep and Goat podcast questions, or you can email me at leon@lostcreekwholesale.net, and just try and give us, whether it's in a message or on an email, just give us as much information, like background to your question, as what you can, and that way we can get the context to what you got going on.
Yeah. And it can even be, if it doesn't necessarily have to be something we discussed. It can be, hey, I'd like to know more about this topic. Anything like that. We want this to be a podcast for the sheep and goat producers. Look, I got goat in there.
Fair enough.
That's pretty good. We want this to be a podcast.
Tell you what, every now and then I'm just going to say the word goat that way.
Yeah. Well, keep just ran
down.
Yeah, we'll get this. We'll get this figured. But yeah, we want this to be a podcast for you guys. But really, both of us, both me and Leon, really have an interest in just the commercial side at a scale that is economically feasible. I mean, it for some farms that might be 50, 100 ewes, and they direct market all their lambs, or they sell breeding stock, whatever. For other farms, that might be a couple thousand ewes. But we want to look at different ways that people are doing it and being profitable with it, because there's a lot of sheep and goat producers out there that are just doing it kind of on a hobby scale, which absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we want to focus in, how can we do this at a scale and replace some of these lambs and goat meat, I guess you say, that gets imported into the United States from all over the world. I don't know what the latest statistics are, but I think it's something like over 70% of the sheep and goat that gets consumed in America is imported. So our goal for this podcast is to replace some of those.
There you got it, folks. There you got it. Sorry, Australians.
Yeah.
We're coming.
But we're selling Australia feeders. Go figure.
All right. So, Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about your production system? And
yeah. So I'm Matt Nault. Me and my wife Katie farm here in southeastern PA, Lancaster County, where everybody wants to be, where everything's great and land is expensive, and it's just a good place to be, minus all the people, but it's a good place. Our farm is pretty diversified. We raise sheep. We do some stuff with pigs, less and less. I used to have more pigs, but that was kind of a natural deep bedding raised pigs, so not your typical hog barns. And we used to feed some cattle, but we just replaced the cattle this year with sheep. We farm about 90 acres here. Some of it's rented, some of it's owned. That's 90 acres of row crops and hay, or row corn, soybeans, your typical stuff. And then we grow some alfalfa and some grass hay for our sheep. While we're talking to the row crops, we do also graze a lot of our row crop fields. We put cover crops out after our corn and beans come off, and we graze that through the fall and winter and spring as much as we can, which is um, I think is a great opportunity for sheep and goat people to to graze some of those cover crops. And actually, I mentioned earlier about the Australian guys had stopped in, and I had asked them what's one thing they see, that we could do different or that we're not doing, whatever, if with sheep and goat production here in the States. And one thing they mentioned, hey, is all these cover crops you guys got, that seems like it would be a great feed source. And it is. And of course, to them, Australia's dry. It's not green year round like it is around here. So I'm sure that was, really just seeing all this nice green cover crops out there was pretty fascinating to them. But they're right. It's a great feed source. I think it's something that's underutilized. And with sheep, we can easily get in there and graze the cover crops off without impacting the land too much. Like if you run cattle on, you'd have to have better fences for one, and you'd have to be really careful about being out there in the mud, or you're going to have fun planting your crops the next spring. So anyway, I'm getting kind of off on a passion of mine there, but so we also have 2 vegetable greenhouses here that we start some vegetable plants for local produce farmers. That's kind of what I grew up with, was produce, and transitioned out of that. I also work part-time as a crop scout for a local agriculture company here. So we have lots of things going on. With the sheep, we have about 370 ewes. That number went up here this fall with, like I said, we replaced we were feeding out some Angus cattle, and that market was really high, so we decided to get out of that and go all in on sheep. So we added another 150 ewes here this fall, commercial ewes. And so beside those 150, we already had 220, mostly red-chested ewes. Those were Katahdins, White Dorpers, Romanoffs, and Texels. So we have 4 breeds of red-chested, and then we have the commercial ewes as well. We do accelerated lambing. We lamb in January, February, some in March, some ewe lambs usually. And then our next lambing would be in May. Those would be ewes that lambed the prior fall. And the ewes that lambed in January, February will try to lamb again in September, October. So we have lambs multiple times a year, which is nice. It spreads our labor and everything out a little bit.
How's that fall lambing working out? Like, how many did you have? Do you have one scheduled to lamb this coming fall? It's whatever lambs.
Pretty much everybody that lambs in January, February here is going to get exposed for fall lambs. What those now, it may be over 300 head that we would plan to breed for fall lambs. We'll do a whole episode on fall lambing,
right,
here in the future. Anyway, so one big piece of our operation that lets us do all these different breeds, collect all the data that we do, and do it in a manner that doesn't mean I spend half my time in the office. Is we bought a Shearwell scanner, and they're EID tags. So all our sheep have EID tags. We have a handheld scanner where, like in the lambing barn, we will scan the ewe. We'll put EID tags in the lambs, and when we scan the ewe, it tells us, who she was bred to, and we record the lambs right there. We can record birth weights. We can even record kind of maternal traits if we want to. We don't really do that because we have other ways that we select for that. And when we're weighing lambs, we have a scale head that connects to our scanner. So when we want to weigh any of our sheep, we just run them through the chute, and it scanned the tag. The scale head sends the weight to the scanner. It's a real quick, really efficient operation. And then all that data, we take the scanner back and plug it into the computer. That goes into a computer program, and which, their Shearwell program is a big piece of that. We can do a lot of different reports, that sort of thing. We can export data from there. That's been a game changer for me. And I don't know, Leon, you have one too. I don't know if you would say the same, but for me, I couldn't do what I'm doing without that system.
Definitely makes it a lot easier. I know Matt's currently running more sheep than what I am, but I bellyached about the price of that system for a couple years. And once I pulled the trigger on it, I only had it I got it about the beginning of a lambing season. And I started using it, and I sent a message to the Shearwell rep, Dan Persons, and said, the bitterness of the initial cost has long been forgotten.
Yeah.
Definitely streamlines. I used to write everything in a book in the lambing barn. Then I'd bring it in, type it into the computer. And sometimes I'd ended up putting it into my record keeping program plus into Pedigree Master. It was a lot of room for error, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you can still make mistakes with the readers entering data wrong, but it definitely streamlines things.
Yeah, I think too, that initial cost was hard to get over, but when I got it, I knew I needed to do something to speed up our process. And I never looked back. And like there's no way I'd have 4 breeds of sheep if I wouldn't have that scanner, because that scanner allows us to put, different groups together, like all our different breeds, we run them together. And then to sort them out for breeding or whatever, or if they're in different production stages, you want to sort some out. It's so easy. You just make a draft
on the computer.
Yep. And then when you run it through the chute, it just tells me you send this one left or that one right. So like if I have different groups whose nutritional needs are the same at a certain point, it might only be for like a month. I'll combine them, especially like if we're grazing cover crops. The bigger group I have, the better. It's just easier to manage rather than managing smaller groups. So I'll combine them whenever I can, even if it's just for a month, because it's so easy to sort them out. That I just run them through the chute, send one way, the other way. Once I really step it up, I could get an auto drafter where I could just put them through the chute, and the drafter would send them the way I want. So that's something for the future maybe, but I think I need a few more sheep to pay for one of them.
Right.
Even pricier.
But these Shearwell handheld units, once you do that draft in the computer, you can pick that in the computer. You can set that to the right is this group, straight ahead's that group, and to the left is another group, right? And then when you're running them through the chute, it will tell you that this sheep, you beep the tag, it says right, shows the arrow to the right, or shows left, right? I mean, that's how I do it.
No, well, I don't think you select the right or left on the computer. You make your draft groups that you want.
Handheld is where you set the right.
Yeah, then when you're so you can have these groups preset where you made these draft groups of this group is in this draft. Mm-hmm. So then when I'm out in the barn with my scanner and I want to sort that group out from the bigger flock, I can just select that draft that I made, and you can have it named like your main lambing group, whatever. So you select that draft that you made, and then you can select to send those to the right, and everything else that's not in that group can get sent to the left. Or you could have multiple groups. You can do a 3-way draft with the scanner. You can either send them straight to the right or to the left, which we just have a right and left is all we have.
Same here. But the handheld literally audibly tells you right and left, and it shows you an arrow on the screen right and left to tell you which way to swing the gate.
Yeah.
When Ben and Bruce from Australia were here the other week, I told them that, I have an automatic drafter. I scan the tag, and my hand is on the handle, and it just automatically moves the gate right to left.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but for me, I get to looking at the sheep or watching what the dogs are doing in the back, pushing them up, and then next thing I know, I send one the wrong way. So, yeah, that's where the automatic drafter would come in handy. I got distracted too easy. So that's the Shearwell system. We also are members of NSIP, National Sheep Improvement Program. All our registered stock currently, except for the Romanovs, we collect a bunch of data on them and send all that to National Sheep Improvement Program, and they send us back estimated breeding values for the different traits we're looking for. That's also a huge part of what I do, and with the different registered groups, it's the estimated breeding values make it so much easier to pick those top animals in my flock than, before we had that. You'd look at weight gain, and then you'd look like on Katahdins, which we're selecting primarily on maternal traits. So then I would look at, if I have a sire that I'm considering for a stud ram, I'd look how well he gained. But then I also want to see what his dam did, and I'd look back through her production records. But it just gets really clunky. With the EBVs, it's considering all her past production records, any progenies that she has out there, it's factoring that in there, what they're doing. We could probably do a whole episode on EBVs too, but I just wanted to say, I feel that's something that's really helped me with the genetic gains in my flock, but also makes it easier for me, just less time spent looking at data, because I get these nice numbers, and that's what we use for the data part of our selection is just, we got these nice breeding values, and it just really makes it easy, I think.
Yeah, we could really get into the weeds. I think Matt and I are slightly obsessed with genetics, and yeah, we could definitely get into the weeds on these EBVs, on the EBV subject.
I'm gonna write that down as a podcast that we have to do. I think we need to do a podcast on EBVs and genetic selection, that sort of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so all our slaughter lambs go to New Holland. So that's probably half of our lamb crop goes to New Holland. Sale Barn, which is a good ethnic market here on the East Coast. Actually, it's one of the larger ones in the United States. There's one down in Texas that's very similar size, maybe a tad bigger, but from New Holland, the ethnic lambs go all over the East Coast here, New York, Boston, just all over. So we have a really good local ethnic market for meat lambs. All our breeding stock, we started doing on-farm sales for that. We started that in 2022 was our first on-farm sale, and then We did 2 on-farm sales last year, and which was 2023, and this year, 2024, we have 2 on-farm sales planned as well, and that's what we plan to continue doing. So all our breeding stock goes to those 2 sales. We don't do any off-farm sales in addition, or at this point, we don't do any other sales. Not saying I wouldn't consider it, but part of doing these on-farm sales was, before we did that, we would run to different, breed association sales. NSIP had some sales we would go to, as well as some online sales we would do. And then we would do all these, selling rams used off the farm here, which was great. But selling rams, especially, it can take up a lot of your time.
Right.
People want to come out, pick out rams, and we have a lot of data on these rams. So having all that data available, so they can make a good selection, was challenging, and just the time factor. This, with our on-farm sales, we just put all our energies towards that. We make sure we have our data for them. We put out a nice catalog with all the information there that they need. We really like it. It really simplifies. It's a lot of work to get ready for these sales. But when I look at it from a year-to-year basis, we have a lot of work a month, 6 weeks before getting ready for this, but then it's done, and we can focus on our sheep production and our genetic production, which I'm really glad that those sales have been successful for us, and I'm really excited about continuing to do it that way. Another part of where we started those sales is, you have a pen of 20 breeding rams that you selected to keep to sell for stud rams. Well, there's probably rams in there that are a lot better than the others, So some of those should be bringing a couple grand. Some of them might only be worth a couple $100. Before, I had one flat price for off-farm sales. I had one flat price. This is what they are. Pick the one you want, just because to go into a pen and, well, that one's $800, that one's $400. It's just hard to do. With these sales, I don't worry about that. I just put them on the sale, and my customers tell me what they're worth. Yep. And they're always right. So I love that part. I'm not a salesperson. I want to do the production and the genetic side of it. I'm the salesperson by default, and with the sales, I just prepare for it, put them out there, have all the data that I can on them, and let the customers in the market decide what they're worth.
This call is sponsored by Lost Creek Wholesale, your universal feeder distributor in U.S. and Canada. Looking for a way to supplement your livestock with ease? Consider a saliva lick feeder. Universal Feeders saliva lick feeders offer the ability to restrict livestock's intake to a preset amount, determined by the adjustment bar depth and width on the feeder. By narrowing the width and depth of the feed in the groove, this gives us the ability to limit the amount of feed that will stick to a sheep, goat, or cow's tongue. Using Universal Feeders' patent-pending easy adjustment system and saliva lick feature, we can limit sheep and goats to less than 1 pound per head per day and cattle to approximately 6 pounds per head per day. We also offer creep gate attachments for both small lambs and kids. Visit our website at www.lostcreekwholesalellc.com to find a dealer near you, or give us a call at 717-310-3641.
So, yeah, that was a quick rundown. Oh, we also started doing some consulting for other sheep farmers. And goat farmers, actually, believe it or not.
Oh yeah, it's been a while since we said goat there.
Yeah. We do some consulting for goat farmers, and definitely not. I never actually. I shouldn't say never. I did slip a couple times over the years and have goats for a little bit, but don't have the production knowledge with goats that I do with sheep. But many things with goats are very similar. Yeah. So So in this podcast, as we probably talk a lot more about sheep than we do about goats, I think you guys will find a lot of those practices can also be useful for goat farmers. So we do some consulting for other shepherds. That was brought about around the same time as we started doing our on-farm sales. It was a time of, in the past couple of years, the sheep business has really expanded here in this area and on the East Coast in general. So a lot of new people getting into it. And I see the sheep business here in the East Coast is something new. I mean, we've been raising sheep and goats in the United States for a long time, but I see on the East Coast here, I feel like it's a relatively new industry, and we're still trying to figure out, good production practices, figure out what works for us and what doesn't. So for a lot of the new people getting in, it's challenging. I mean, I know you and me, Leon, we were new people getting into it at one time, and talking for myself especially, there's a huge learning curve. There's a lot of years that I did not make money.
A lot of dead sheep.
Yeah, unfortunately. Unfortunately. So we've been doing it for a little while now. I don't consider myself an expert, but we have been doing it for a little while, and we made a lot of mistakes over the years. So I feel like we're starting to get some stuff figured out. It's a long way to say, we were getting a lot of phone calls. I've always been had an interest in helping people get started, or even people that are doing it, sharing new ideas of different ways to try. And so one of the things, so the reason we decided to offer the consulting is not to get away from, just taking phone calls and answering people's questions and helping them out. We still do that and still want to do that. But you can only do that much in a phone call. And if it's someone that's relatively new to it, he's probably calling me because he has a mess on his hands because, he overfed his ewes in gestation or underfed them, and now we're lambing and we just have a mess. So we thought, well, we'll start offering consulting. That way, somebody's new into it, they can get us to come out if they're local here, or we can do some over the phone too. But we can go over their program and try and avoid some of those problems up front. So that's been good. We don't do a ton of it, but we do some, and it's been a great resource, I think, for people just that are trying to figure it out. And we can go out there and go over some things and try to put a program together that works for them. And I'm kind of a fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy, but by necessity, I'm becoming more and more, what's your program? What's your plan? Because you got to have a program, you got to have a plan. And that's going to be the difference, I think, whether you're profitable or not in this is, having a good program, having a good plan in place. And I'm still always going to be trying new things. It's just who I am, and I think that's a good thing. But
hey, it's no fun if you can't experiment.
You gotta have a program in place, and try and think through some of these things of even just ways that you can save time in the lambing barn. I mean, that's something I spend a lot of time thinking about, is how can I be more efficient with my time? Because when I look at sheep and goats, it applies to both, and look at the efficiencies, and then I look at the prices of what we get for lambs or kids compared to what we get per pound for cattle. There's got to be money in this.
Profit margin is significantly huge.
Yeah. So what's holding us back? And what I always come back to is the time factor. I mean, it is a more labor intensive thing than raising cattle. So I think the time factor is what we really got to focus in on and try and be more efficient with how we do things. So I think about that a lot, and I think some of that comes back to your system, your plan, your how you're going to do things. If you can get those things nailed down, you can really lamb a lot of ewes by yourself, and take care of them. Now, if you're constantly having to doctor sheep, doctor lambs, whatever, that can take up your whole day. Just a couple problems a day can take up your whole day. So if you can avoid those issues with having a good system, having a good plan in place, I think that's key. So I don't know how I got off on that track, but anyway, I think I was talking about the consulting we offer. All that's just to give you guys a little bit of a background of what we are, who we are, and what we do. I should also say with the sheep, we do have some Marama guard dogs that we run with them. We don't really have a predator problem around here. We have foxes, which could be an issue if you're lambing on pasture, but even then, they're typically not a big problem. There is occasionally some coyotes in the area, but not enough to really be an issue. So the only reason we really have the guard dogs is because we like them and to prevent neighbor dogs from attacking our sheep, which actually is a really good reason to have them. If you have a bunch of bred ewes out there, especially like we graze cover crops in the fall, and we graze some on other farms too. So those ewes are just out there on behind poly wire, and it's ewes that are bred for winter lambing, so they're heavy bred. If we have a dog get in there one night, he might only kill 10 ewes or so, but if we're getting close to lambing, we're going to lose a large percent of our lamb crop right there just from chasing those sheep around and stressing them. Because if you get dogs in there, they'll just chase them and harass them. And if your ewes are close to lambing, that's going to kill the lambs. So
you can kill the ewes even too. Just
it'll kill ewes too, but
you can bring on ketosis, type symptoms and stuff like that. Just from stress.
That's definitely a reason for us to have these guard dogs. We do also breed and train border collies. I'm relatively new to the training part of border collies, and that's been fun. It took me a while. I attempted to train before and ended up sending that dog off to a trainer. But it's been fun now that I've figured a way out to do that works for me. And border collies they're just so much fun to work with. And when you start seeing them get the hang of what they're supposed to do, I don't know, it's just a lot of fun.
I agree.
They're just finding their God-given purpose. It's just so cool to see. So I think that about covers it for what we do here.
All right. So thanks for giving us a rundown there of what happens on your farm, Matt. So for myself, I already mentioned my name's Leon Gaiman. We have a farm here in northwestern Pennsylvania. As Matt would say, sometimes I'm almost in Canada. I'm just south of Lake Erie by about 50 minutes maybe. So LC Ranch is the name of our farm. We have been doing sheep now for about 12 years. Actually, sheep is how Matt and I met, I guess. We were at one of the Katahdin Expos in, where was it? Do you remember, Matt?
Tennessee.
Cookeville.
Cookieville, I think. Yeah. I think it was one of the first ones they had there in Cookie.
Yeah. So I was there at the expo with my car. I wasn't planning to buy anything. bad idea, but got to meeting people and looking at sheep, and some point I saw this guy that had this name tag on that I was pretty sure it said Leola, PA, and sure enough, got to chatting with him, and anyway, he agreed that if I bought something, he would haul it back to Pennsylvania for me, and that was the beginning of how Matt and I learned to know each other.
I think you bought a couple ewe lambs, if I remember.
Yeah, I bought 3 ewe lambs.
I bought a
ram.
good ram,
Yep.
and I ended up breeding your ewes to my ram.
Right, we just kept them there at your place, so after
Yeah.
breeding season.
And then I think I got a ewe or a ram out of that deal somehow. I think
I can't remember how that was.
Something worked out like
Yeah.
that. So
You said a good ram. Do you ever look back and look at the sheep you bought years ago?
yeah,
It's almost scary, isn't it?
Yeah, that ram did not turn out to be so good for us. I mean, he was decent, but his numbers really dropped over the years. But
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah, well, you live and learn.
yeah. But that's so. Me and Leon had been scheming and dealing with the sheep thing for a while, because that's probably how many years ago? 13?
12 or 12, I think. I think it'd be, yeah.
That would sound about right, because I think I'm 15 or 16 years in the sheep thing now. And that would have been a couple.
Yeah, I think this was back in 2012, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway. Yep.
Anyway, we've done a few ram experiments since then. Some of those were bad too, but some of them were probably better than others.
And some were good. Yeah.
So when we got started, we started with about 130 commercial ewes, and we had some ups and downs with that. Killed a few. First summer, I think we killed about 30 head with Rumensin toxicity due to an overdose in our feed, and that was kind of a story in itself. I guess I won't go off in those weeds. So anyway, we also bought just a few registered items at that point, and got our numbers up to around 200 breeding ewes. And then my wife and I, we were just renting where we lived. We had to downsize there for a while, and then about 4 years ago, we bought the small farm here in Crawford County, Pennsylvania. And so we're trying to get our numbers back up. We don't have them where we want them yet, but it's a work in progress. And I guess in that time period where we downsized some just due to the property we were on in our facilities, we switched pretty much 100% to everything being registered, and that's still where we're at today. So we switched a little bit more from just a commercial producer selling market lambs to more of a seed stock producer. We obviously still sell quite a few ram lambs into the meat market, but I guess pretty early on we had joined NSIP and entered just our registered ewes into NSIP. So obviously now everything is in NSIP, and Matt already elaborated on NSIP quite a bit. I'm not going to go into much detail on that, but we submit our data, lambing data, production records to the National Sheep Improvement Program, and we get our EBVs back. And that's definitely been a great tool in genetic selection for us here on the farms. We still have to do some visual appraisals. We don't want to just use the numbers strictly as our selection point, but they're definitely a big tool in genetic progress. So as far as our system and type of production we do, so we lamb January and February, just getting started. We have about a dozen lambs on the ground so far. So those lambs we creep feed, and we wean usually around 60 days. And at that point, usually our grass is barely getting green, just starting to get green way up here in Canada.
Poor guys.
Yeah, I look at Matt's green cover crops sometimes with wishful thinking, but we can usually turn our ewes pretty much out onto pasture. It's a little bit early at weaning time, which is we're lambing the end of January, beginning of February. That puts us April, sometime that we're probably weaning. And we keep those lambs in the barn, put them on full feed, and we try to have the lambs that are going to go to market weight by 4.5 months old. And then normally any replacement ewe lambs that we're going to be keeping or offering to sell for breeding stock, usually by midsummer, we will end up putting them out on pasture. And sometimes we'll supplement them, just depends on what the quality of our forage is at that point. Ram lambs that we select as breeding potential, I like to get them out on pasture. I call it hardening them off. I like guarantee when I sell a ram that it's not going to fall apart when they dump it out with the ewes. You still have to take care of them. You have to remember they're still a young growing animal, and if you're going to make them work, they're going to lose some body condition, but we don't want them just totally falling apart. So I like to put them on pasture, still supplement them some, keep them growing well. I like to see those rams learning how to graze, which, believe it or not, is something that is a learned behavior. You'd think eating is something that came by default, but it's definitely something they can learn from other sheep, or even lambs from their mom can definitely learn a lot, just as far as the grazing aspect of things. So we do offer ram lambs as breeding prospect rams for sale. We have usually sell directly off the farm here. We have participated some in some of the online sales, whether it's the Katahdin Association or the NSIP has offered a sale different times. Some of those have been a good place to meet new breeders and network. It's something I always enjoy, getting to those events and sell some of your ram lambs.
And get your name out.
Gets your name out there, yeah. Let's get some rams on some other farms. Let people try them. You get feedback. That's one thing I like. I like to get that feedback from from other producers.
Yeah,
how the sheep performed.
Yeah.
So we pretty much run our ewes on pasture April till the snow gets too deep, which this year it was
September.
No, it was after Thanksgiving.
Oh, wow. Man, you had a long summer.
Yeah, we did. So we do rotational grazing with those ewes on pasture. That's something I still experiment with. It's still a learning curve, but I try to move sheep every 3 to 5 days. Don't do it every day or anything like that, but rotating your pastures does a lot for your parasite control, as well as you can get a lot more forage off your pasture. The more you can get those sheep on and off that pasture, the better. And maybe at some point I think we'll have an episode on grazing and fencing, and maybe touch on cover crop grazing too, I guess.
Yeah.
So we have some rented ground. We make some of our own hay on that, and in the past we even balled in quite a lot of our hay. It wasn't until more recently that we have had our own ground that we've been making our hay on. There's some pros and cons to that. I like it that sometimes I feel like I have more control over the forage that's coming in that way. Sometimes when you're buying hay, you think you know what you're getting, and you end up getting into it in the middle of winter. It's not quite what you thought you bought, but overall buying in hay has worked out pretty good for us.
I think if you're going to buy in hay, having those connections and trying to buy it from the same guys all the time is important. And I've gone to the hay auctions and bought, but if I'd have to buy in a lot of hay, I think I'd try to build those connections where you're buying from the same guys who get a lot more consistent supply. You know what you're getting into, because if you're buying at the hay auctions, you just never know for sure.
Right. We do feed a lot of wrapped baleage, and I think, Matt, you do some of that too, and even some corn silage.
Yeah, very little dry hay. No, but it's nice to have it's safer, and it's easy. There's no transition. You can just use it and put them right on that. So
right. The only negative with the wrapped wet hay is if you only have a few sheep in the barn in the middle of summer, it doesn't keep. I don't know. You need at least, I don't know what you need in the summertime, but
Depends what bills you're feeding.
yeah, how wet they are and how big
Yeah.
they are. Once you open it up, you don't want it. You want to use it pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So like Matt, we have Border Collies here on the farm as well. We got our first Border Collie almost from the very beginning. We got our livestock guardian dogs at the beginning too. I think it was in the first probably 6 months of having sheep, we thought we needed a Border Collie, and we thought we needed a livestock guardian dog. My first Border Collie, I think I got pretty lucky with. He probably knew a lot more than I did, really. And he was probably 4 or 5 years old till he looked anything like what a Border Collie should look like. I guess when it comes to working sheep, I'd never seen a dog work in person. I don't even know if I ever even saw a video, really. I never paid that much attention to Border Collies until I got serious about sheep.
Was that dog trained when you got him, or did you train him yourself?
We got him as a 10-week-old puppy. And I still remember when we brought him home, I put him down in the sheep pen, and of course I had no idea where to start, really. I hadn't even read a book at that point. I just knew the Border Collies went with sheep. But I put him down in the sheep pen, and he went right into that very typical Border Collie stance, head down, tail down, and just with that hypnotized looking stare, like I call it, that Border Collies do. And he was slinking over to those sheep, and I thought, wow, this is so neat. But, I ended up literally taking or training some of what he wanted to do naturally. I tried to stop him from, because I didn't know what I was doing. When it came time to teach that dog to do a gather, I had to retrain that back into him. So till it was all done, he was probably 4 or 5 till he eventually he could do a nice outrun. I had a left and right, like a come by and away to me command on him. And he never was trial perfect, but there's no way you would have wanted to be without him.
No.
And he started getting older, and at some point I realized that, when this dog is ready to retire, I'm not going to have another dog. So we're going to have a problem, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So we ended up buying Gem at that point, and I did some basic training with her. And once Turbo retired, I really started working with Gem, and that's the dog I'm still using today.
Yeah.
We did get that Maverick dog from Serendipity Stock Dogs here. What is he, 2 now? 2.5 maybe. Has a lot of potential. I need to spend a lot more time with him. But actually, Matt, just as of this morning, we have a litter of Gem and Maverick pups.
Okay.
Gem had 4 puppies this morning. So hopefully a couple of them make some.
How is Gem working for you now? Is she doing pretty good?
She's not trial perfect, but she's doing. It's like people say, your first dog. No dog is ever as good as your first dog, right? Don't you always look back at that dog that was like supermodel? I don't know.
My dogs are getting better.
Well, yeah, there's still some quirks to Turbo that I still like.
But every dog's unique.
Exactly.
Some dogs just they train themselves, and the next just take more work.
We really ought to. I mean, neither of us are professional trainers, but it'd be fun just doing an episode just on Border Collie training.
It would.
There might even be somebody we could bring on to talk about it.
Actually, that's a great idea. Yeah.
So we'll have to pick up on that some more.
I'll chalk that one down too.
All right, good. Our list is getting longer.
Coming episodes.
We won't run out of stuff after all.
No.
So we also have livestock guardian dogs. We have an Anatolian Shepherd. We have had some Pyrenees crosses, Polish Tatra, Spanish Mastiff crosses in the past. Some dogs were good, some weren't so good. It seems like with those livestock guardian dogs, there's just still, you're going to get a handful of them that just don't turn out, and the next ones are really, really good dogs that you wouldn't want to sell for anything.
Yep.
So as far as our sheep production, that pretty much wraps it up here for at LC Ranch. One other thing I might mention that's on our horizon, or I guess you could say, is solar grazing potential. I've been kind of watching the solar grazing industry for a couple years now, and we turned down a couple options that we just didn't think were fits. They were too small and too far away. But more recently, we were approached by a solar company that is doing a fairly big site here, local, that would really work out. I think for us, it would be logistically, it would be close enough, and it could work out very well. At this point, it's nothing set in stone yet. It's a long process, a lot of paperwork on the solar company's end as far as the logistics of everything, and
it's a fun process, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. I've been working at it for what, a year and a half now?
Yeah.
I think maybe.
I look at the solar grazing, and man, it seems like such a great opportunity, and it is. It's a opportunity to graze pretty large acreages and get paid for it. But then I would do it if I'd have the opportunity. But then the downside is kind of the paperwork and working with the companies and all that.
It's working with a lot of paperwork, and this is just from what I've seen so far. It's going to be a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of moving pieces, and a lot of people up the line that you have to be keeping happy. But I'm excited about the potential that it has, and I guess it's just going to be some time yet till we know whether and if we can make it work out.
Exciting opportunity. I hope that comes through for you guys, and just in general, it's exciting to see the interest in solar grazing and that potential.
Sure. Yeah, so I think that pretty much wraps it up for.
Yeah. One thing I thought we should do here at the end of the podcast to wrap this up is share any resources that we might have, books, websites, anything like that would be helpful for people. And we could maybe have some links would try and have some links in the show notes to those sites. But what are some resources that you would recommend?
So for myself, early on in the sheep journey, I bought one of the American Sheep Industry Sheep Production Handbooks, and this is a pretty thick book. It's I don't know, probably have one here in my hand. It's probably 2 inches thick.
Yeah.
And that is a book that gets updated periodically as more information becomes available. So for somebody who doesn't have internet access, that book has a tremendous amount of information in it. Anything from a pretty in-depth thing, chapter on nutrition, to genetics, to a lot of common problems. You can even get this on a flash drive, I think, that they update every so often.
It's searchable that way.
Searchable on the flash drive, yeah.
Do you know how much those books are now, Leon? I'm thinking they're like $104, something like that.
I think my wife actually bought this one for me for my birthday, maybe. Okay. And that's probably 10 years ago, and I think it was $70.
Okay. Yeah.
But well, it's probably 100 something by now, I'm sure. But like I said, it's definitely a lot of information in there.
That's a book I use as well. It's a great resource. I don't think I've ever read completely through mine, but I definitely turn to different chapters of it time and time again, and it's great. So yeah, it's definitely a great resource.
So along with that book, one other thing that I often resource I like to hand out or suggest to people is that the Maryland Small Ruminant page, sheepandgoat.com, it's called. There is a tremendous amount of information on there. They have a resources tab. They have a sheep 101 and a sheep 201. They list some of the market reports on there. They have a blog. There's a lot of information all in that site, or that you can link out to from that site. So that's two of the resources that I have.
They have on that website, they have a couple different spreadsheets. One of them is like a sheep enterprise budget spreadsheet. I've used that. That's great. They have a ration mixer
Right.
spreadsheet where you can mix different rations and it'll tell you your percent protein, that sort of thing. And then they have a what do they call their other one? Not the ration mixer, but like the complete nutrition. It's not coming to mind, but they have like a complete nutrition spreadsheet where I just plug in, I put in my test results from the different forages I have, the different feeds I have, and it has the requirements for your different animals at different stages. And that's what I use to balance our rations for our TMR mixes, and as well as like if we're grazing cover crops or something like that that's new to us, I'll do takes forage samples there and put them in and just see if I'm deficient in any of the minerals or just how that's balancing out. That spreadsheet is something I use regularly. Lots of good information.
Right. And it's not a sophisticated program or anything that you need. It's just a simple spreadsheet that anybody can run on their computer. And once you figure out how to use it, it's pretty amazing what you can do with it. So what about you, Matt? What's one of your go-tos?
So one resource I would recommend is the Pipestone That book. Just a ton of very practical information written by Dr. Kennedy. As some of you may know, he passed away a number of years ago, but has a lot of, like I said, just practical sheep production information in there, and is very helpful in that way. I would highly recommend that to anybody that has sheep or goats. So we got the goat thing in there again. That's good one for the goats too.
That's a good thing to end on. Then we'll just with that good goat comment and call it quits.
Yep.
So all right, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this time.
Sounds good, and we'll see you next time.
Once again, this is the Profitable Sheep and Goat Production Podcast, where it's more than just our hobby, it's our bread and butter. Thanks for listening, folks. Come back and join us as we converse with farmers and ranchers who are leaders in the industry, interview nutritionalists and veterinarians that can answer questions and offer valuable information. Our goal is to bring you a monthly episode as well as doing question and answer episodes. Got that sheep or goat question you'd like answers to, or something you'd like to hear discussion on? Give us a call at 717-310-3641. Select the option for sheep and goat podcast questions and leave a detailed message. Or send me an email at leon@lostcreekwholesale.net. Thanks, and see you next time. Universal Feeders, feeding your livestock one lick at a time.